this is Brett. I'm from Car Oracle. We are a licensed automotive dealer in the state of California with an auto broker's endorsement. Our primary line of business is helping consumers select, source, and negotiate for the vehicle of their choice for both new and used vehicles. So we are auto brokers and have a lot of conversations with clients looking at different ways of finding the vehicle that they want. And for the purpose of this video, I want to talk about the advantages of leasing a vehicle, even if you have the every intent on keeping the vehicle beyond what the stated lease term is, and you want to keep the car for maybe 8 or 10 years. So there's a few reasons why you'd want to factor that into your analysis. We'll walk through those, and at the end I'll give you some reasons why you'd want to give pause, and we'll go from there. First is, when you're looking at leasing, let's establish that it's a rental agreement with an option to purchase at the end. So you're defining a period of time and a period of miles that you'll be using the vehicle, and at the end, you're turning it in back to that finance company, generally through the franchise dealer, paying a disposition fee, and generally walking away. So that's the optionality that you have versus on a traditional car loan. You don't have that. There's not a guaranteed, your car be worth $30,000 in 36 months, and we know at this point you'll be at a break-even point, and we'll take the car back if you want to change it out. That doesn't exist, right? So that built-in optionality is advantageous for a couple different reasons. One is for people whose life circumstances might change. They might be moving, might be picking up new hobbies, might be planning a family, or maybe your children are planning a family and you think you'll be needing different transportation. You're not sure in that period of time. Having a lease gives you the ability to sort of take that 3-year period, evaluate the vehicle, evaluate how it works for your needs. Does it still fit the lifestyle that you envisioned it would? And if you say yes, great, you can purchase it at the end. If no, you have an easy exit out of it. The second reason is looking at your finance charges. And that, interestingly enough, the money factor on a lease, and sometimes the equivalent money APR of that money factor, is less than it is if you were purchasing. So why that generally will happen is when a manufacturer is subvening a lease and creating more incentive on the lease, they might buy down that money factor to an equivalent APR that's lower than it would be on the purchase. So if the equivalent APR on a lease is 0.12%, and purchase is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9%, the cheaper money can be advantageous for you to look at. And there's a sales tax piece which I'll touch on at the end, but keep that in mind when I'm talking about 0.12% and lower equivalent APRs. The other reason from a structure perspective leasing can be advantageous is if you're looking at an electric vehicle. With the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, there was stipulations put in on which vehicles would qualify for the $7,500 credit at purchase, and it has to do with where the batteries are made, the final sourcing of the sourcing of the materials of the batteries. Interestingly enough, a lot of those same stipulations don't apply to leasing. So you can have a situation where if I lease an EV, I might be able to get a better effective APR on that lease than I would if I purchased it, and I'm going to get the $7,500 versus if I purchase it, I won't. So that's certainly extremely advantageous in that situation. So you're getting optionality and potentially cheaper money, plus the incentive. The third has to do with risk, and this is one I won't get into too much detail here because it probably would take too long, but in the scheme of thinking about whether there's an accident, depreciation, all of those scenarios where a car is totaled, in many situations when you have gap insurance on a lease, there's less exposure. You know what you're exposed on, right? You know the leases. You didn't probably put a lot of money down up front, and effectively something happens, you know what you're dealing with. With a purchase, it's slightly different, right? You can still have gap insurance that helps cover if what the insurance company pays out in the vehicle is less than you owe, but there's generally more at stake. You generally put money down up front. You certainly paid all the sales tax up front. You're not getting that back. So from a risk perspective, and I'm happy to delve into this if any of you have questions, but that's another thing to factor in. And now let's talk about the downsides. So why wouldn't everyone do this? First is a lot of people don't qualify to lease. So that's one sad fact. Leasing's coming back a little bit. Prior to the pandemic, typical lease was 30% of the market, dropped during the pandemic as incentives pulled back. We were in the high teens. Now it's starting to rev back up, particularly on EVs. But a couple of downsides are there's a lease acquisition fee. So when you start a lease, generally you're going to pay $6.95 to the finance company, or $7.95 or $5.95. That's a bit of a shocker to some. And the second is, I mentioned at the end, if you want to drop the vehicle off, you'll pay the disposition fee. So now obviously if you purchase the vehicle at the end, you don't have to worry about that, but you have that. Third one is applicable in California, and I'm certain in other states as well. Let's say that the money factor is not the equivalent of 0%, that there's an equivalent money factor. There's a finance charge that you're paying. And so on your monthly payment, you're paying a rent charge, which is, let's just, for sake of math, let's say, the rent charge is $250, and that's your usage and what have you. And then there's a finance charge on that as well. The finance charge is part of the total payment. So you're paying for the usage of the vehicle, the depreciation, plus the finance charge, and then sales tax on top of it. So when you're looking at the pros and the cons of leasing versus a traditional purchase, the reality is you're paying a lease acquisition at the outset, but your sales tax is now also based on your interest charge. So that can be a little bit of a disadvantage, right? Particularly if it's a higher cost lease. You're saying, my God, I'm paying not just sales tax on the depreciation, I'm paying the sales tax on that plus, my borrowed money. What I mentioned earlier about the risk of sales tax and those pieces can negate some of those things. And this is just some of the conversations that we'll have with clients when we're just looking at the different options. And there's more to get into, but I just want to throw those out there to help some of you out there who might be considering leasing and maybe a little gun shy. Obviously, if you're in the state of California and would like some assistance in your next car purchase, reach out to us at caroracle.com. I'll drop some links in the description below. And with that, I hope you have a great day. Thank you so much for your time.